Please give us an update of the UN conference in Cancun.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Well, let me first start by giving our greetings to the third International Conference on Climate and Energy in Berlin, Germany. Lord Christopher Monckton, the third Viscount of Brenchley, former science advisor to Lady Margaret Thatcher, is joining me along with Dr. Roy Spencer, a former NASA scientist from the University of, and now works at the University of Alabama at Huntsville. Let me say right off the bat, it is a lot better to be here this year in Cancun than it was last year in Copenhagen. Right off the bat, there has been a significant temperature increase. We see, for example, the average temperature last year in Copenhagen was around 30 degrees Celsius. 30 degrees Fahrenheit. This year it is at 81 degrees Fahrenheit. One suspects, Christopher, that this is a result of man-made emissions or natural variability?
Oh, this is definitely man-made global warming. We have had an enormous increase in temperature between Copenhagen and Cancun. You just have to ignore the little matter of the difference in latitude between the two cities.
Well, one would anticipate such jargon from a skeptic that it would be natural variability, but we will wait to see what some others have to say about that here in Copenhagen. Now, this is a conference that has about 10,000 delegates. Over 193 countries are gathering around the world to try to create a successor to the Kyoto Protocol, which is set to expire in 2012. Now, they certainly have a lot of work to do, Christopher, since last year's meeting in Copenhagen.
Last year in Copenhagen, they failed, and the world breathed a sigh of relief. Now, however, they're trying again. They have abandoned the idea of going for a grand world government treaty all in one go. That failed even before Copenhagen. What they're now trying to do is not even to introduce a successor to the Kyoto Treaty. They've decided that the easiest way forward, since they already have that treaty, is to use the processes that are within that treaty already to amend it, in particular to extend its scope from the closing date for Kyoto, which was 2012, either to 2017, 5 years out, or to 2020, which would coincide with the end date of the Copenhagen Accord 10 years from now. So their approach is to try to make sure that they simply amend the Kyoto Protocol, because that way, what they're trying to do here is to overcome the biggest problem that they face in trying to impose a world government on us, and that is the Constitution of the United States, which requires that 67 of the 100 senators in the upper house of Congress must vote in favor of any new treaty to ratify it. So they're hoping that if they can merely amend the Kyoto Treaty, they can perhaps then get President Obama to bring that into effect either by executive order or by getting the Environmental Protection Agency to pass regulations to bring it into effect.
And that's a good point, because what you see now, and some of you may have seen in the media in Germany, is a attempt to try and reconcile the differences between China and the United States over a number of different issues. One is compliance, which China has been resistant to, but of course China has also been resistant to any sort of binding cuts that would be imposed on its industries. We have Japan making a surprise announcement this week in saying that they were not in favor. This is a country that hosted the Kyoto Summit, now saying it's not in favor of extending the Kyoto Protocol or necessarily entering into a new agreement unless China and the United States join.
That's quite right. And one of the reasons why Japan is taking a skeptical line on this is that the Japanese Academy of Sciences has begun to take a skeptical line on the science. A group of leading academicians in Japan just last year described the entire IPCC process as little better than astrology. Now, in China, Shi Zhenhua, who is the chief Chinese negotiator, has a very clear stance, which he first enunciated in Copenhagen and is adhering to here in Cancun. what China is saying is, if you want us to cut our emissions, you in the West, who can afford it, they think, have to pay us in China to make those cuts, and we will only allow you to verify that we have made cuts if they are cuts that you in the West have paid for. So the only concession they are actually making on the question of verification, contrary to some reports that have been appearing in the press, is that they will allow us to verify cuts in emissions that they make, but we have paid for. Otherwise, they will stick to the plans set down in the annual statistical communiques of the regime in Peking. And the great thing about a dictatorial regime is that if they say they're going to do something, then they will do it. And what it says is that they will build 1 or 2 new coal-fired power stations every week from now until it was originally 2015. Now it's going to be 2030.
Well, it sounds like there is a lot of differences of opinion here in terms of whether or not the negotiations will be able to reconcile these differences between countries. Of course, on the skeptical side, where we don't view that as a negative thing. We are hopeful that the process does not continue for reasons that it would harm the economy and seems to have a weak scientific basis. At the beginning of this conference, the chairman, Christine Figurine, she gave a prayer to the moon goddess, it appears, and one can only wonder if that will have some bearing on this conference and maybe settle some of these differences.
Well, here we are demonstrating once again that what we are dealing with is not science, it is superstition. The fact that the Costa Rican opened this conference, said a prayer to a long extinct pagan goddess, nicely sums up the whole Cancún process, as does the fact that the plenary sessions are being held in a hall called cenote, in other words, the sinkhole hall.
All right. Well, the science is also clearly exploding under the feet of the whole global warming cause here in Copenhagen. Of course, this started a year ago with the ClimateGate revelations, with the emails that were leaked from the University of East Anglia in England, your native country. And it really hasn't stopped. We had the Himalaya glacier scandal, and this has impacted public opinion polls. You see support for the global warming cause going down on a whole host of fronts, whether it's not just the politics, but also the science. Their cause seems to be dropping in terms of its effectiveness.
There's one reason for this, and that is that the extremist position, which is reflected in the documents of the IPCC and given effect in all these attempts by the UN Framework Convention to get an international treaty on the climate, they are based on science which has now been largely disproved. Roy Spencer, among others, have shown that key elements in the calculation by the IPCC of how much warming we can expect from a given in CO2 concentration are so incorrect that very large exaggerations result if you use the IPCC's methods. Take away the exaggerations and you take away the climate problem, and most ordinary people now realize that.
Well, this is a good segue to bring in Dr. Roy Spencer to our discussion. Roy Spencer is a former NASA scientist. He now works at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. He is the author of several books. One of them is Climate Confusion, and also The Great Global Warming Blunder, which is one I suspect, Roy, you're going to be bringing down copies of here and offering to sign copies for the delegates in attendance.
Well, if I can, whatever I can fit in with my luggage, right?
I can't imagine that would be a big seller down here in Cancun, but it is noble that you're coming down here. What are you hoping to accomplish by coming down here with the CPAC delegation? What message do you want to give to the delegates down here?
Well, that the science isn't settled, and that they need to start listening to some of the skeptics out there that have some different ideas. You know, science advances through alternative hypotheses, alternative explanations for how things work. The IPCC long ago stopped looking for alternative hypotheses to explain warming. Specifically, the one that I think needs to be looked into is the possibility that climate change is generated by the climate system all by itself. I think it's mostly just internal cycles that affect clouds. And then if you affect cloud cover by 1 to 2%, you've got global warming or global cooling. This is something that the scientific community has not looked into, and it's just due diligence. It's looking into alternative hypotheses the way scientists should be, rather than trying to spend all of their money marshaling all of the evidence to support only one hypothesis, which is the one that mankind is causing global warming.
Well, and I think your job, I would think, would be made a little easier, perhaps with these ClimateGate scandal, the leaked emails. They had an interagency review panel not long ago look at the IPCC, said they handled their data sloppy, and there were some other reforms that they suggested. So we have some calls for the resignation of Pachuri. You have a whole host of things going on that seem to indicate the science on the other side hasn't been handled properly. Has that given any sort of boost to your arguments and being taken seriously?
I think yes, at least amongst the public. What I find is that the public, citizens, were really shaken. They were really surprised. They were dismayed. They were upset about ClimateGate. Of course, ClimateGate showed behavior that we knew, that we skeptics knew was going on all the time, because we see what's going on behind the scenes. Now the public is aware. I guess the thing I'm worried about is that the IPCC process over 20 years ago wasn't developed to find the explanation for global warming. It was formed to advance policy changes. I know this because I know the insiders that were involved in all of this. And so I fear that the IPCC process at the outset is fundamentally flawed, because it's not science-driven, it's policy-driven, and it uses scientists to try to advance a certain policy.
Now, I want to broach a subject with the two of you right here, because I know that, can we have some coffee, please? I know that there have been those, even in the German media, that have indicated that there was, in fact, you guys are on the payroll of industry. Would you say that that's a fair accusation?
Let me just try this coffee here. No, that's horrible. Take it away before anybody reads the name on the cup.
Yeah, this is a little bit...
Yes, we might just clarify this. Neither Roy Spencer, nor Craig Rucker, nor I are paid by ExxonMobil, but Mr. Tillerson, who is the chief executive, should you by any chance happen to watch the video of this conversation, my address is Carrie, Rannoch, Scotland, and I look forward to receiving a large cheque as soon as possible.
We just get that out of the way, because we understand that is sometimes raised in the German press, and that is not true. I am the executive director of CPAC. We do not receive any money from any leading oil company, nor have for some time. Now we're going to highlight a couple things here. Dr. Spencer, you're going to be holding a press conference with Lord Monckton the second week. I think Senator Inhofe initially planned on coming. He's not coming, but what is it that you plan on telling the delegates at these press conferences, CPAC press conference next week?
Well, certainly from my point of view, I think the most important thing that I will be doing is I won't be talking about the science when I'm sitting in the presence of so eminent a scientist and so brave a scientist as Roy Spencer. Scientists like him who have gallantly fought the good fight to keep true science in front of the public over all these years, despite the most appalling, vicious personal attacks, are very brave men. And so I won't in any way science. I will be speaking about the economic side of the global warming question. I've recently been looking at how much it would cost to try to carry out some of the policies for mitigating global warming that are being advocated by the IPCC and the other climate extremists here in Cancun, and then working out just how much, or to put it more correctly, how little global warming even the fullest implementation of these policies would bring about. There is no way that you can address global warming, even if it is on the scale fancifully imagined by the IPCC, by trying to reduce carbon emissions. It is quite clear, economically speaking, that the best way forward is focused adaptation to the consequences of any warming as and where and if and only when necessary.
Well, and that's very well put. And I know that in Bali, when we were in that conference, you came up with a statement, we need to have the courage to do nothing.
Yes.
Do you still stand by it?
This is absolutely right. One of the great ambitions of politicians is to interfere and be seen to be doing something. And some politicians say, we would like to be the ones that go into the history books as having stood together and brought about the end of the global warming problem by introducing enormous taxation and regulation of carbon dioxide. This kind of childish desire to appear in the history books is very damaging. And what I would say is that there is much more glory now to be found in standing up and saying we are not going to steal any further money from taxpayers or regulate them anymore in the name of saving the planet, because the planet was perfectly satisfactorily saved 2,000 years ago and it doesn't need to be saved again.
Well, on that religious note about being saved, I take it, Roy Spencer, when you come here, you're not going to be praying to the moon goddess in your press conference?
No, I'll try to stick to the science. I'll let Christopher handle the other side.
All right. And is there any particular thing? Is it out of your book, perhaps? I know you've done some good work and groundbreaking work on this whole idea of the Pacific oscillation and wind currents. Are you going to develop that some more? And how is that being received?
Well, for the most part, my research is largely ignored. That's what I found over the years, is if you find something that challenges the consensus.
Well, and I know that inside this conference, I doubt either of you will be well received because this is a convention of global warming believers. But outside of the conference, I know you both have done very well in the media. In the United States, there's a big program, the Rush Limbaugh Show, Dennis Miller. There are many big radio hosts who will have you on Fox News. I also know that there will be people in our U.S. Congress taking very seriously what both of you say. There's been an election in the United States. The incoming House is talking about opening up investigations of ClimateGate. They just recently, perhaps for the purposes of this conference, abolished Pelosi's Committee on Energy and Global Warming.
I think it's very important that, in particular, Roy should be here, because it is necessary for some of the delegates here to realize that there are serious, credible, diligent, experienced scientists right at the top of their profession who do not believe that global warming is a serious global crisis and have good scientific reason for not believing that. There's no substitute for talking to these delegates one-to-one, face-to-face, quietly, and explaining where the holes in the IPCC's methods are. So I think there's great value in us being here, but at the same time, of course, increasingly now the media, even the mainstream, very left-wing media, are finding it increasingly difficult to resist pointing out that there is, after all, another side to the story, a side that is in fact the true side.
And just yesterday, Lord Bumpton had a chance to run into one of those other sides in the media, but he bumped into Andrew Revkin of the New York Times. And I read his blog today about that encounter, and it doesn't appear as though you two actually sparred, and it seemed a little more civil. Not that I think he's changed, his opinion, but I guess he at least entertained your question.
There's been a very notable difference in the attitude of both the media and the delegates and even the environmental extremist groups here at Cancun compared with Copenhagen only a year ago. Then they were bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, arrogant, pleased with themselves, masters of the universe. Now, some of the more thoughtful ones, and Andy Revkin, whatever one might say about his views, is a thinker. They are beginning to realize The game is up. The show is over. The curtain is coming down. The bucket of mess is about to land on their heads. And they're beginning to prepare what businessmen call their exit strategy, and not before time.
We thank you very much for allowing us to come on this webcast during your conference. Wolfgang, if you have one opportunity to, and you have people in the audience that would like to ask our guest questions, we'd be happy to entertain them.
Good evening, Christopher. A question for you. You spoke at the beginning of the strivings at the conference to extend the Kyoto arrangements out, I think it was, to 2020 or even beyond. My question for you is this. Does that relate in any way to the fact that the United Kingdom is, I believe, is it running some soccer tournament at about that time?
Well, it was rather hoping it would be running a soccer tournament in 2018, but it hasn't yet won the contract from the International Federation of Football Associations, so don't hold your breath on that one, Bob. But that is one of the more intelligent questions that I've been asked in the last few days about global warming, so thank you.
You should hear the laughter in the audience here. Okay. Sie merken, wir müssen es nicht immer tierisch ernst machen. Und wie die Botschaft auch von den beiden mit den Tassen auf die immer wiederkehrenden Behauptungen in der Presse, die immer einen vom anderen abgeschrieben sind, wer hier irgendwen angeblich finanziert. Okay, I just added a few words about your cup story just before. Yeah. And it seems the audience is like either exhausted or just too keen to watch the film now. I mean, it's now here 10 minutes to 10 in the evening. So, and last chance.
Hey, Wolfgang.
Yes.
Can you show us the audience?
Well, they can show you the... Yeah, try not to mess it up now. Wait a sec. So you got quite an applause, and so in that case, I mean, it was a premiere for us. I mean, so why not to repeat it at some other time again? Craig, thanks a lot for organizing everything, and Lord Monckton giving us this insight from inside Cancun, from there where so much is going on. And Roy, thanks a lot for appearing there. I hope to see you soon. And I wish you, in that case, a great day. Enjoy Cancun. And yeah, have a nice day then. Bye-bye.